Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another episode, number 3 it is actually, of our weekly podcast that we kind of call the same name as the show, which is Where It's At. Basically, what we've been doing, or just setting out to do over the last few weeks, is try and get some initiatives together to take a closer look at our immediate environment in terms of buildings and what we would call old world, Tartarian, fake history, unknown history, whatever you want to call it, and maybe do it with a few people, whatever, and collect some information and talk about it. So that is what we're doing right now. Thank you, anybody who's listening right now, for joining us, and of course, thank you to anybody who at a later stage will probably listen to this. Much appreciated to you all, for the support. Like I said, we're just starting out now. Hopefully we'll generate a bit of interest and momentum as time, whatever that might be, goes by. Anyway, on that timely note, I'd like to introduce my co-host, as it were, Ellie. How you doing, Ellie?
Hi, Sven. I'm doing well, thank you. Not too bad, not too bad. Nice Sunday evening. How are you?
Yeah, all grand. All grand, thank you very much. It's been a bit of a cold few days here, windy, but then again, for this time of year, allegedly, quite normal weather. I don't know, how long have they charted weather? Since records began, they tell us, don't they? Whatever that means. What does that mean? 80 years, 70, 100 years?
Absolutely.
Yeah, before that, the horses were doing it. They were charting the weather on the back of their carts with their little hooves and their little horseshoes, writing down, and their little slate tabs with their little slate pens, recording our clouds and heat waves. Anyway, I was going off on a very facetious tangent then. Right, so we recently released, so recent that it's within the last 24 hours, a video talking about the Corpus Christi Church that's here in Boscombe in Bournemouth. It was something that I took a load of photos of. I think you've seen it from a distance when you came down here, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, I definitely did.
And you and I kind of agreed that there's a group of buildings here, quite a few of them in this area in particular, that they bear all the hallmarks of let's say, quite knowledgeable construction know-how, as it were. And I've just double jeopardized myself in that sentence, but you know what I'm trying to say. The intricacy of the work, the size of it, the scale of it, and the amount of it, the volume of it. There's a lot of it dotted around this area, kind of made us take a closer look, basically, because it just doesn't fit with the official timeline, right? So we put out a video about Corpus Christi Roman Catholic Church here in Boscombe, but there were one or two points that I didn't mention in that video that I'd like to kind of revisit or perhaps mention. Do we have a couple of photos to accompany that, Ellie, please?
We do. I shall bring them up for you now.
Yeah, so, just as a quick background while Ellie's doing that, this is a church that is supposed to have a bell tower that's 108 feet tall. The main bulk of the building is 33 feet tall. I won't get into the numerology. But the interesting bit also is the fact that it's one of many, many buildings in the surrounding area. We're talking within the space of, 1 mile circumference, quite literally. There's a lot of these kind of buildings here, right? And they're predominantly made of just brick, as you can see there on the screen that Ellie's sharing with us now, right? So that there, when you on approach to that, you already see the evidence of it being bottom heavy, right? Or squashed, if you like, or whatever. It looks like they've kind of the floor has come up a bit too far up to the building, if that makes sense. But nevertheless, you can argue about that, I suppose, but what you can't argue about is the sheer volume of bricks that it takes to build this, and then the work that goes into it. And I should have made more of a point of the fact that, the closest train station in this region is one called Folkestone, and it has 2 tracks, one going outwards towards London, so east, and one going westwards. That's it. And that wasn't built until 1886, 87, I do believe. And it used to be called Folkestone train station until it was renamed in 1896 or 97 to, yeah, it was renamed to Folkestone train station. But the point I'm making is there were no transportation possibilities or anything of the sort. There was no infrastructure to support the transportation of the manpower, never mind all that. And never mind even forging out a capability of being able to quarry all of that stuff. It's just absolutely remarkable to think that that could even be possible. So couple up with that time, Boscombe was supposed to have a population of under 250 souls, and Folkestone not quite double that. So you're talking under 1,000 people lived in this area for a good number of years whilst this lot was being built. So you're talking churches like this, the Corpus Christi Church, and only a decade or so within that same timeline, the water tower that we did a video on, the Boscombe Water Tower. And then you've got the other churches that I'll reveal, not reveal to you like that, but, reveal in terms of a little bit more information of the other churches around here. And there are a few other buildings as well that we also have photos of. I mean, just look at that building there, that is quite a phenomenal building that has to go deep into ground because it's on quite a bit of a hilly area as well. You're only about, not even half a mile away from the top of a cliff there, by the way. So if you went right from there, if you look to the right of that picture there, so there's the front of the building on the left, and on the right there, if you carried on going in that direction, you would eventually hit the water. You would hit the cliff. So it's about 300, 400, 500 yards away, maybe. But extravagant building nonetheless. And of course, in the official timeline, they talk about extensions here, refurbishments there. And then to throw in a bit more Confucius, they'll add in all the lords, ladies, bishops, and whoever else sponsored and gave money, But that is just a cracking example of how it can never, ever fit into the official storyline. It can't. They just never had the capability of being able to manufacture those bricks in those times. And that's not the only building that was built in that era. It was supposed to be a whole load of them. So, so bear in mind that, and bear in mind the fact that the ground level has clearly changed, unless they built the buildings after the ground level had risen. Then, you can see there a massive discrepancy in the timeline. Go ahead, Ellie.
Well, it almost looks like you are, like we said last time, you're almost like looking at the top of the building, and that's it. You're not seeing the whole building as such. There's more to it than what we're actually seeing, as you say. Interesting.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting. I'm just looking here because I mean, that's you can see that church from all around the area as well. That's the funny thing. I mean, if you took the trees and the buildings away, obviously, but it's quite a prominent, well-built, constructed church and building. Yeah, and there we have all the little telltale signs. The white and the red brick, of course, and that goes much, much deeper into ground. Why would you bother even building an archway like that? I mean, how to complicate your brickwork, eh? I mean, look at that. Why would you bother? Who cares about what the entrance looks like when you're going to go in and worship something or someone or whatever it is they do in these places? I could think of a few other things, but my daughter might be watching this, so I'll leave it.
So, on the with these buildings, these and the brick. The two walls we've looked at so far, and there is one in Ormskirk, not far from where I am, that we are interested in looking at. It all, like you say, we've been looking at the Industrial Revolution and the timeline of that, which I know you wanted to go into more?
Yeah, well, the Industrial Revolution is a thing that seems to be mentioned and yet nobody knows much about, right? It's a bit like the book 1984. Everyone's allegedly read it, and then when you ask people about the intricacies of the book, nobody has a clue. So it's the Industrial Revolution was actually split into two dates. Certainly, a lot of people talk about the first and the second Industrial Revolution, right? That's not to be confused with the industrialization of a nation or of a population, which those is the same thing. It isn't quite the same thing, right? But the Industrial Revolution, according to mainstream sources, I'd like to emphasize that point, was first began in 1760, or between roughly 1760 and the early 19th century, so 1820s, 1830s. And then you have the second Industrial Revolution, which kicked in mid-19th century, which is what Ellie and I are always talking about, because that is where everything seems to then kick into play. Whether you talk about the invention of photography or the steam engine, allegedly, and all the rest of it, suspension bridges, tunnels, all the rest of it, all that stuff that you could safely construct on a globe Earth, of course. But yeah, so even there they start creating a lot of ambiguity, or they use a lot of ambiguity with splitting the Industrial Revolution up. So there's your first confusion tactics right there. Because don't forget, when you look at from the position of the handlers and the power brokers, their job is to hide this history from us, but not make it too obvious that they're doing so, but still also leave a clue that they are doing so, and they can so if they want to. So it's a big game of charades, smokes and mirrors, mockery, and all the rest of it in play here. Right? And people do get affected as well, because of course they've used a lot of events to hide this history. Whether it's wars or fighting in the streets or anything else like that, allegedly. We've got evidence of that now. I'm not saying that's the reason for that narrative right now, but I'm saying it's a handy thing to have going on if you want to destroy a lot of your buildings. But yeah, getting back to the Industrial Revolution, the point is, inventing a steam train or steam power is not the same as having it running nationwide, up and running, being able to use as part of your infrastructure, right? And that is the key here to understanding this correctly. So let's say in the Industrial Revolution, the second one, like that makes any difference. Let's say in the second Industrial Revolution, the mass manufacturing of bricks didn't happen until 1885. Let's chop 20 years off and say it was 1865. Then it still doesn't explain everything that was erected and constructed in the period from 1860 even, let's give them that, to the beginning of the 18th century, when we're led to believe that people lived on fields in tents, or they served the local king or sheriff or lord or whatever, or if they were lucky to get away from that, they got enrolled in the local army and went off to war somewhere. And if they were really lucky, joined a cavalry regiment and managed to sit on the back of a horse. I mean, it's crazy to think that an agricultural society was even capable of doing anything that we're told that they were. So they had to insert the Industrial Revolution or an event of some sort to explain all of that. Because a lot of this kit stood around the world, especially bricked buildings, right? They need explaining.
Yep, they certainly do. So on that note, I will just quickly say hello to chat. Sven can't see the chat, obviously, at the moment. So it is just me. But we're working around that, aren't we, at the moment, Sven? It's all good.
We are slowly catch the monkey.
Yeah. So we shall start by saying hello to Ken, Claudio. Thanks for being here, Ken. Lovely to see you as always. Crystal Shaman. I always say Shaman, I think it's Shaman. She's very lovely. She's here. She's got a question as well to ask. And Eric Doulion, who's on his way, I think he said he's on his way home. He's coming back from Florida, so he won't be in the chat much, but he is listening. So thank you for being here, Eric. Lovely to have you here. I think Crystal said the building itself, the church, Corpus Christi, she says it looks magnificent. It's stunning. And she was just wondering, do you think because I think it's obviously it's all on the table, isn't it? That they used sacred geometry measurements to do these buildings.
I think they almost must have done. Because there's no evidence of any. This is the thing, right? There's no evidence of any plans. I know I said in the video, and I'm going to as well, by the way, I'm going to write and do some freedom of information requests. I'm going to submit some to the council and all that and the local parishes. But I think Crystal is onto something totally, because it's something I've asked myself ages ago before I started really looking at this properly. We've all taken a look at it, but actually looking at it properly takes up a lot of time, and it certainly leads you down rabbit holes, right? Especially when you've got the opportunity to see these things up close, which is, for me, is key, because you get a much better understanding of it. But I think that if we can't find any plans, and no council has any recollections, as my friend has told me is the case, because he got no response from about 5 or 6 parishes when he wrote off to ask for these building plans and stuff, right? So why would you fabricate a history if you have a sound history? But I could imagine you covering up a certain history, not allowing or not wanting us to know certain stuff. And Crystal might well be making a really good point that maybe they wanted to hide that. Well, yeah, it's not just hiding the building, it's also hiding those subsequent questions, isn't it? Well, how did they build it? Well, you need to hide that as well. And I think there could be some sort of sacred geometry going on. Whoever it was much more knowledgeable, because we've been kept in the dark, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. We
I
have.
agree. I would say, yeah.
Yeah, I do as well. Like Ken's also pointing out, obviously, you know, the geometry, the shapes, and it's all measured, isn't it? It's a measurement. Yeah.
It is measured, and there's a lot of theory as to the rose windows and the sides of churches or in the gables of churches and stuff like that. And, you know, you can plot a lot of these buildings from above, and they make up things like pentagrams and stuff. You know, I mean, there's been a lot of back research done in all of that, where clearly there's a lot of symbology involved. Again, how would you use the use of airborne imagery if the plane wasn't invented until whenever it was, by a couple of brothers stood to the left, or was it right? I keep forgetting, but you know what I'm trying to say. You know, it's so even that, you know, the symmetry of all these buildings from above as well. How do you manage all that? If you're looking from above, how do you manage to look from above? I know they talk about hot air balloons, but when were they invented? So I think we probably, I don't know, there's so many things that overlap, but them don't make sense timeline-wise. I think it's to unscramble that somehow a little bit.
Possibly, yeah. I think
for me,
so.
certainly. Yeah,
I would say so, definitely. Yeah, there's a lot to look into, but definitely geometry. I mean, I've looked into geometry obviously over the years, and I actually had a friend that was very interested in geometry, to a point where they were doing a lot of the drawings, you know, on that, you know, just all geometry kind of artwork, which was very good. And Ken mentioned about the doors, you know, the size of the doors, obviously, how tall, high.
Say that again, please.
Which the doors, you know, on these buildings, they're very large. I mean, when you look at a lot of these buildings, they are very large.
They are large, and yet when you take a step back from the building, it looks like the ground has come up halfway up the entrances. So it's like, although they are very big, they still, I think, are much bigger. And they, of course, weren't entrances to halls for us to worship. They were entrances to probably get stuff into that building.
Yeah.
Because they're quite big, open, you know, they're big, open, hollow, I was going to say, not shallow, hollow buildings, a lot of these, aren't they? Now, I know there's a lot of theories in the Tartarian world about how fireplaces may have been used to even feed the inhabitants of these buildings and stuff like that, which is why they probably didn't go out to get food and all that sort of thing. I get it. There's lots of theories to that. I've been in a building that's had these massive fireplaces. There's a place off the coast of France called Mont Saint Michel. And I took a load of photos, and I stood in front of one of these fireplaces. I'm 6'1", and this fireplace was well above my head. And you know, clearly not meant as a fireplace. And there were two of them next to each other. They were absolutely ginormous. So clearly they served for something. They had some sort of purpose. And it's all made of massive rock as well. There's nothing on earth could have lifted a block of rock that big. And, you know, it's just unbelievable stuff, really.
Absolutely. So we will be looking more into that as well with the geometry side, the shapes, and because when you do look at these buildings, they've all got these similar designs on them and
I,
patterns.
yeah, I agree, and I think every angle that this civilization used had a purpose. It
Mm-hmm.
had a purpose. It had a reason for everything being the shape it is, including the so-called star forts or star cities from above, the star cities, I should say, from above. You look at the geometry of them; it is perfect. Perfect. How would you do that? Surveyors would have a problem aligning all of that today because you're not building it on a tennis court. You're building it on hills in the middle of forests. These buildings were erected in the middle of nowhere, allegedly. I mean, this building here that we were talking about, for Corpus Christi Church, right? Yeah, if you look at the actual timeline of the Boscombe area, it's supposed to be all shrubs and woodlands across this whole region of England at that time. So again, they're contradicting themselves in the official narrative because how on earth would you clear your pathway to even get to open land to start digging for stuff? You know what I mean? It just leads to so many more questions that I guess a school teacher wouldn't have time to answer if you were a switched on kid or if you were taught a little bit of the truth.
They're not taught the truth, are they?
No, and in turn, we don't get taught the truth.
So it's down to us to, and especially if you have kids yourself, if you've got children, is to do it in a gentle way, and do it in like a playful way as well, especially with young kids. I think is to make it fun for them, make them see that when you're taking them out anywhere and you pass these buildings, just draw a little bit of attention to the size of the building and how it looks and the size of us, and let them just look at it, because kids will actually see it more than what we probably give them enough credit for.
Well, I mean, if you asked the child to come and sit next to you, like your own kid, or me, my daughter, right, and I said to my daughter, right, come here for a second, I just want to show you something, and then I put up a picture of, I don't know, let's say the Parliament building in Budapest, a magnificent specimen of a building, right? And then I'll also show her at the same time, next to that photo, the means of transport humans had at their disposal at that time. And then I would ask her a simple question: do you believe people capable of that would build that? And I guarantee her answer every time would be, don't be silly, Dad. Right?
Yeah. But the thing, like my youngest Harry, he looks at these buildings a lot more, and even now, he will say to me, he's questioning it more. He's looking at them. He says he feels there's more to them. Particularly now, I think he notices them more as well, and how the designs on these buildings are similar. Even churches to your art galleries, even to the town halls, the similar designs on them.
Well, they all have the same kind of characteristics. You have these round towered kind of buildings, a bit like the Corpus Christi Church. Now, I know a building that's almost identical that's in Münster in Germany, where my daughter was born. Same kind of things, like a tower kind of shape, roughly about the same height, slightly different color because it's made of slightly different rock, but same sort of features. And, like you just touched on there, it doesn't matter what country you go to. Of course, we have to drop the concept of countries and the whole notion of different peoples and different languages and different religions. That's been, of course, introduced very cleverly over the past 150 to 200 years. So much so that people actually think it goes back thousands of years. That's how well they've worked on that, to divide and conquer even more than they're already doing, right? But, yeah.
What do you want to touch on? Sort of.
Well, did you mention? I was going to mention the fact that you put the email address up for anybody who fancies. If anybody does ever shoot some footage of any nice spectacular buildings or anything like that, and would like to talk about it on any podcast that we do, we're going to be doing this every Sunday. Then that would be great to have a bit of interaction with people who can share their photography and actually talk about it, and maybe talk about what they managed to find out about the building, or give us all a task to do to find out something about that building or whatever, and then come back and compare notes or whatever, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we can share it on the stream, and any pictures, any information, and if they want to come on and talk about it, as you say, that would be exciting stuff too. Definitely.
Yeah, because it's something that's accessible to everybody, and that's the point I was going to round off earlier, which I'd forgotten about. But you know, the fact that this is all over the world, which is why I made that example of Munster, is, well, that again adds to the mystery. How did they communicate that technology or that know-how to each other across vast spaces like that, vast distances? If we're to believe that they didn't have the transportation possibilities at their disposal as we do today, right? Or the communication opportunities that we have today, allegedly. But then, you know, they tried to get Einstein to tell everybody the ether didn't exist. We all know that's a lie, because that's how most of this technology functioned in the first place. And I guess that's part of that push to suppress it, right?
Exactly. So, and to keep us dumbed down enough, you know, keep us in that blur, you know, of nonsense. You might
so
say.
Not only was he drafted in to make everybody think that relativity was true, but you know, also to make you think the ether didn't exist. And I'm pretty sure the top tech companies make use of the ether on a daily basis. How else would you talk in real time, thousands of miles? You know, but yeah, it's interesting stuff. There's a lot of unanswered questions, and yeah, I think the powers that be are still, well, they're still tearing down these buildings to this day, aren't they? Or refurbishing them, or whatever they want to call it.
Yeah, refurbishing, or, you know, listing them and refurbishing them and
bringing them down because of office fires, kind of thing. You know. Yeah, it does. Well, it has connections to everything else, doesn't it? Straight away.
Yeah, there's a building on Law Street. I will take some pictures. I'll pop out later and do that. But it's now known as the Old Bank, and it used to be a bank. Then it was a bar. I think it was a restaurant at one stage. Now it's just closed, and it's pretty big, quite stunning to look at. So yeah, we'll be sharing pictures of where I am soon, so you can see the buildings here, because there are some quite interesting ones to look at.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on that note, did you want to go a little bit more into the Industrial Revolution, or did you want me to share anything on that, or did you?
Well, if you've got a couple of pictures, you can share it if you'd like to.
I've got something from the British Library, and it goes on about transport. Now, I know where you are, there's no canals, is there?
No.
So if you
there is no canals.
I'll let you look at this, and I'll mute.
Okay. Yeah, so as a background, there's no canals in the area where I live, and there's also no rail network in that sense. We have down the south coast of England, you have literally a couple of train tracks that come through Boscombe. That's part of the rail network that goes through Bournemouth. Bournemouth has a few platforms, but they will go off in different directions. It's not like it connects every single street with each other. It does not. So it certainly wouldn't have done then. So if people use that as an example of getting stuff around and like infrastructure and transport networks, well, they're very much misled and mistaken, because that is not true at all. Right. So if you look at this that's on the screen that Ellie just put up here, I won't read it all out. Well, I'll read a couple of bits of it out, but you know, it talks about the demand for coal after 1750. Again, first of all, impossible to verify. I don't know if that's even true. Well, I don't believe it is at all. Because of the growing demand for this essential raw material, many mine owners and industrial speculators began financing new networks of canals, like there was a canal going down the back of every house. That's not what happened, right? There are regions where there are good networks of canals, but even from the canal to your destination, you've got to get there with your goods, right? Absolutely. So you only have a horse and cart. Let's not forget, we only have horses and a cart at our disposal here. We don't have charabangs or anything like that. right? So they began financing new networks of canals in order to link their mines more effectively with the growing centres of population and industry. What nonsense. So they had canals and rail networks that linked the local population straight with the coal mines, did they? No, they didn't. The early canals were small, but highly beneficial. In 1761, for example, the Duke of Bridgewater opened a canal between the colliery at Worsley and the rapidly growing town of Manchester. Within weeks of the canal's opening, the price of coal in Manchester halved. Other canal building schemes were quickly authorised by Acts of Parliament in order to link up an expanding network of rivers and waterways. By 1815, over 2,000 miles of canals were in use in Britain, carrying thousands of tons of raw materials and manufactured goods by horse-drawn barge. So not even the barges were mechanised or, steam-powered. But, 2,000 miles of canals. There's none here.
No, well, there isn't. I know.
The point I'm making is, you can make up 2,000 miles is not massive in a country. You can get 2,000 miles of distance together in terms of canal, just to connect up to your rivers. We know that most of these canals already existed anyway, right? They weren't man-made. Again, how would you build them?
I know.
Or they may have been man-made or civilization-made, but certainly not by us.
Yeah. We know there's canals in, obviously, Britain, and I know of, obviously, the Leeds to Liverpool Canal, which I've been along many a time, but where you are, in Bournemouth and Boscombe and the surrounding areas there's no canals.
No, there isn't. And look at this timeline again on this transport section that you put in here, right? By 1815, over 2,000 miles of canals were in use in Britain. Right. Well, I'd urge everybody to go on to Google, Wikipedia, whatever, and just Google, beginning of the 19th century, roughly, what was going on with Britain at that time. And then explain to me how a little island nation doing all the stuff that it was up to the beginning of the 19th century still has the capacity and the wherewithal and the resources and the money, the funding, the manpower, and all the rest of it, the expertise, to thrash out miles and miles and miles of canal networks, start off an industrial revolution, whilst hammering out all these huge buildings all around the country. It's just tremendous.
It is. It really
Give that some thought. If people really think about that, in a time in the beginning of the 19th century, don't forget the world population only made it to 1 billion up to 1900, according to the stats, the official stats. Right? It's my favorite one, my favorite example of nonsense. But we're up to nearly 8 billion in 122 years. So what were we doing for the thousands of years preceding 1900? And that would include this region, this time now that they're talking about. 1815, they'd finished building all those canals. How? They were in about 20 wars around the world.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned to me earlier about obviously a chap you were talking about to me earlier, and you were talking about Dublin.
Yes.
It just reminded me obviously about the potato famine in Ireland, which was in around, I think it was 1845. And obviously I've been to Ireland, and I've been to Banagher and Petumna and around there fishing. And the workhouse there that I visited to look round, I found it quite eerie, but when I look at it, I also question it as well, because obviously with all of this, we know that we're not being told the truth, the true facts of everything. And you obviously were quite interested in this chap that you've looked at. So if you want to, I don't know if you want to let everybody know about that.
What about what I was watching earlier about the Dublin thing? Yeah.
Because it was interesting.
Well, it was interesting. And again, you have to add together all these catastrophes that these people allegedly were subjected to. How on earth did they survive it all, right? So the potato famine, for example, was supposed to be the mid-1900s. So you're talking 1845-ish onwards, right? Now, in Dublin, I discovered I've never been to Dublin. Right, I have a lot of friends who've been there. I've never been to Ireland actually, but what Dublin is known for is old buildings, or they used to have a lot of old buildings, especially buildings with pillars on the front of them and that sort of stuff, right? And big like obelisks with or like plinth type things with statues on the top of them, a little bit like Napoleon, like Trafalgar Square, like Nelson's column. Sorry, right? Similar to that. But they were talking about how, you know, construction and destruction of these areas seems to be a feature, and you know, they're also talking about how they believe that the Easter Uprising, for example, was used as a cover to destroy a lot of these buildings because, again, in terms of weaponry and explosives and all that, you would never have been able to wipe out the amount of that city that was wiped out. And one of the reasons that was given for the city being so badly damaged was fires, down to grenades and things like that being thrown at each other, and shootings and a few tanks and a bit of artillery. That's it, right? But yet we're supposed to believe that this old world city, basically, you could call it, was left in death and destruction after that. You know, now this is only a few decades after the, you know, over 1 million people, according to the mainstream, succumbed to the potato famine in Ireland. Over 1 million, you know, in 1845 or from 1845. So when you think about how much misery people allegedly had gone through in all these periods, there was nothing but struggle and pain and horror by the sounds of things. So you're almost, the history books are almost giving you that impression that not only are you living in more modern, advanced, civilized times, but you're also living in a time where you need to be more grateful and thankful for what you've got. Look at all our forefathers and how terribly they lived, etc., etc. So that's one way. That's one reason why I question a lot of the narrative, is because I believe that's part of the reasoning for that miserable history that we read about in our history books at school, right? But I thought the whole concept of Dublin, for example, a very fascinating one. And they pulled up a lot of old photography of Dublin, and it's quite astounding. The buildings that are there. Who on earth, again, built that stuff? It's just crazy. And by the way, go on, sorry, Ellie.
When everything was going on, how did they have the manpower? How did they have the
How would you build buildings that were supposed to be built in the early to mid 19th century when your country has nothing to eat? Who builds that then? You know what I mean? Do you just Do you fly over a few 100,000 people, have them work, have them living in what, and then fly them back out again? Do they go home on weekends? Did they live all inclusive? Did they have Marriott hotels built around Dublin that we don't know of? I don't know. You know, it's just madness.
Yeah.
It's absolutely madness. In a period where you've got 1 million of your people dying, you're not building anything. You're trying to survive.
Not when you've got people dying. Starving.
Yeah. No, you're not building anything. And it's just the same with the UK. It's the same thing. You're not building massive buildings and factories and stuff when you're busy fighting wars, trying to take over the world and build British empires, right? Well, if that's the case, you know, you're building a navy to try and rule the 7 seas and all that nonsense, right? Well, you know, rule Britannia and all that. Well, while you're doing that, you haven't got the time, the resources, the energy, or the manpower to build anything at home. Have you? Heck, you haven't. And the same goes with this. Again, it doesn't drive, does it, at all? Just doesn't.
Not at all. No, not at all. And Eric Dulion mentioned that a tremendous amount of Irish came to America during the potato famine. That was done on purpose by the British to starve the Irish. Now, he is obviously right on that. A lot of Irish did obviously go to America.
60 million, according to the history books. 60 million, yeah. 60 million Americans allegedly stem from Ireland.
Yeah, they do.
Which is a fifth of the whole population.
Yeah. And he's also going to send us some images in, which will be very interesting to see. So thank you for that, Eric. We will be looking forward to that. The email is on the screen. where it's at oldearth@gmail.com. If anyone would like to send any images or information in, I'll just do a quick shout out again, shall I, to everybody in chat. So
Please do.
yeah, hi to Ken, Crystal, Serious Truth, Stacey, Ken Claudio. I've just said Ken already. Ken gets another shout out. Eric, Julian, and Shappy, Chappelle. Thank you for being here, Shappy, and Crystal Shaman. I always say Shaman, but it's Shaman, and she's lovely. So thank you all for being here. And yeah,
there was a band. There was a band in the late '80s called The Shaman. By the way, you remember them, won't you, Ellie?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Move Any Mountain.
That's a good song.
It's a very good song, a very good tune. So anybody want to grab that tune? It's called Move Any Mountain by The Shaman. Anyway, showing my age now.
Zen Wen's just popped in. Hi, Zen. So
getting back to the whole Ireland thing, right? So you can always parallel write a history whilst carrying out events. You know, it's quite an easy thing to do. So while you're shipping people from one country to another, because of course you need the manpower, you can easily say that there's something going down in a part of the country that you're not going to know about, because don't forget, you didn't have the transportation methods to be able to go and check it out for yourself in those days. You were told what to do, and then you did it. It's a bit similar to what's going on in Ukraine at the moment, by the way, and I'm not going to get into a discussion about whether it's true, not true, whatever, but one thing I do know from my own experience is that you are so isolated in your little pockets where you are over there in a situation like that you don't get to know what's really going on. You're watching the media coverage. And the powers that be know that. That's how it works with the information spread. So in those days with no media coverage, you can imagine how cut off people were from each other. So you could easily send over thousands of people from an area of a country, tell them this, that, and the others happened, and at the same time create a mentality and a narrative around another country to generate tribal thinking, to generate nationalism, to generate patriotism, and then you can start pushing flags and countries and identity, national identity, and all of that on top of all of that. So it's quite cleverly done. If you do that over a space of 150 years, you've got yourself some nice bits and bobs set up around the world, haven't you?
Absolutely. So it is all very interesting stuff, and we are going to be going into it a lot more deeper, because we are just touching on things at the moment, aren't we, Sven?
Yeah, we are, because that's what you have to do.
Yeah, and starting with BRICS, we felt was the best way to move on this, I would say.
The key thing to know about bricks, regardless of what size, shape, color they are, is when they were mass produced. That is absolutely key. And they are most definitely were never mass produced. Even the most critical of thinking people who want to even criticize me on this one, you can go back to 1860. I'll even give you that. But then, please explain to me the dome in Florence. So, you know, there are plenty of things that are just, you know, ridiculous to imagine that they were built the way we're told they are. It's that simple. And these things we need to teach somehow people, especially our kids, to question that, and then it's okay to do so. I think that's what we're getting at with this topic more than anything else. Because, you know, you could say, well, where's it taking you? Well, it's not so much that it's taken us anywhere. We're not revealing anything that hasn't already been looked at. But it's a question of generating that courage and that conviction to perhaps question a little bit more and be more open with that questioning. And if you have kids, do it through that, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you know, to look at things, question them, just take it at face value as well. That's been told. That's what, you know, it says there. So that's that. It's more interesting to go and question everything. To question everything, to look at things, look at them more, look at the buildings around you, look at the surroundings around you, look at castles. I mean, these castles that are built on these big mounds of, you know, and we're told that they're built at such a time, and we're told all this history, and things don't seem to add up.
No, they most certainly don't add up at all. And they're not supposed to add up. They're also supposed to be confusing at the same time. And where have we heard that before, right? Seems to be a trait, you know, an MO that we know they use on many, many things. When I say they, I'm on about, you know, the controllers, if you like. The chaps and chapesses that house the little temple down the road from where I live, of which there is one in every town, more so than there are churches. That's telling in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, there's one around the corner from me right now. It's about 2 minutes away.
Yeah. Well, you know, circle, square, and all that. But anyway, so there we go. So that was a bit of an update on where we were at with what our thinking at the moment. And just to mention the video that was put out yesterday, you know, a couple of bits and pieces cropped up last week, so it got a bit difficult to get out a bit earlier. But nevertheless, we managed to get out in time for this podcast. Was there anything else specifically that you wanted to address, Ellie?
I think things obviously regarding the mudfloods and Tartaria and that side, you know, go more into that. But we are going to. But where we're at the moment, we've decided to start with the bricks and the Industrial Revolution and move forward that way and move backwards as well, if you get my drift. You know, move forward to move back.
Yeah, I firmly believe that the key to our history is closer to now than what we think it is. I think the looking back too far is exactly what we're supposed to be doing, and we shouldn't really. We're supposed to be doing according to them, but we shouldn't really be doing. I don't think we need to look that far back. I think we're literally talking a couple of 100 years maximum.
Yeah, I agree. It's not long, really. Not long at all.
Not really.
And it's something many of us have been interested in for a while, and we, you know, wanting to take this further now more. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much where we're at the moment.
That's where it's at right now. The buildings are still standing, whilst everything else around it is aging.
Well, I mean, you might be. I'm a little bit younger, only a tiny bit. I'm only joking.
Well, like one cheese said to the other, "You're not very mature, are you?" Anyway, the old ones are the best.
Now. Absolutely, young Sven.
Well, so anyway, listen, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say thank you for everybody coming in again. I did at the beginning of the pod, so thank you to everybody. I can't see you in there now, but hope you're all doing well. I hope you all had a good weekend, everyone in the chat, that is. Because I can't see you in there. I don't want to make the mistake of omitting somebody, so I won't try and remember the names you mentioned earlier. But yeah, I hope everybody's doing well and everything's, you know, people are coping well with, you know, life in general. And look forward to seeing and speaking to you all soon. I'm going to put a video out myself in the next couple of days about something totally unrelated on my channel, but that's a different thing. I'm not on here to plug that. Yeah, so anyway, that's all I wanted to say, really. Speak to you all soon.
That's great. That was really, really lovely. Excellent. So we'll be looking out for your video, definitely. Yeah, so thank you, everybody, for being here. Ken, Crystal, Eric, Shappy, Zemwen, Serious Truth. I don't know if I've missed anyone. I'm still got to get used to the chat. Zemwen, I've just said Zemwen before, so she gets another little shout out. Hope you're doing good, girl. Yeah, thank you everybody for being here, and anybody that watches in the future, thank you also for joining us. And we will see you all again.
We will.
Sunday.
And Ab's friends, of course, yeah. And well, I guess it's good night from her.
And it's good night from him.
That's half an hour.
Bye bye.